Hey there, everyone. So, if you like to watch left-leaning YouTube much at all, you've probably heard of the term Breadtube, a phrase used to describe a group of left-leaning video essay channels which emerged around the same time as the rise of Bernie and as a reaction to anti-SJW YouTube in 2016, and which today more generally refers to left-leaning YouTube video essayists of all sorts, really. While the word Breadtube is meant to be a broad identification, I think there's a certain subsection of Breadtube, which I feel is actually distinct enough in its own right, to the point that they actually aren't really a part of Breadtube as it's commonly understood at all. I am talking about Beardtube. No, not that Beardtube. This Beardtube. The idea of the name Beardtube comes from, as far as I've found, the Beardtube subreddit, and is both a play on the phrase Breadtube and a reference to how Marx and Engels and Lenin had beards, before Joseph Stalin came along and distorted Marxism by choosing to have a mustache instead. As you might have guessed, given the people it's named after, Breadtube tends to be seen as... I'm going to be mixing up these two words a lot, aren't I? Beardtube tends to be seen as more radical politically than Breadtube, which is generally more liberal or social democratic in its politics. Things can get pretty radical and anti-capitalist, but if they do, it's usually not consistent across that channel's videos and or overt in the delivery or its messaging. I think PhilosophyTube, for example, is definitely anti-capitalist as a person, but she's not always very overt about this kind of thing. Noah Samson, who this video idea was originally inspired by, is another example. He's very anti-capitalist personally, but while he sometimes goes into that, most of his content is not related directly or even indirectly to anti-capitalism. This isn't saying Breadtube is bad at all. I think PhilosophyTube and HBomberGuy and Noah Samson and FD Signifier, among many others, are all really cool and good for leftism and add a lot of value. These are all channels that helped me get into leftism, and I also think more couch messaging like these channels have also has value in not scaring people away. In the end, the main distinction between Breadtube and Beardtube is simply whether the channel's content tends towards being consistently, explicitly anti-capitalist and Marxist. And that's where Beardtube stands out from the aforementioned channels. Being explicitly anti-capitalist isn't the only differentiator, though. Beardtube also often has much less of a focus on the vibe or the aesthetics of the video production. This isn't to say that the video is a blurry 480p video of a guy in a balaclava speaking inaudibly into his $10 microphone. And don't get me wrong, that's a vibe on its own. But that's not really the norm, it's just that the visuals usually are not really the focus, but again, there are many exceptions. Beardtube also tends less towards emphasizing one's own persona than Breadtube does. There's almost never much in the way of merch or unique catchphrases or a sort of personalized lingo revolving around the main character of the channel. Especially with the Marxist-Leninist channels, there's also among some of them a leaning into openly Soviet or Maoist aesthetics, which personally I'm not a fan of because it can easily turn off newer people, but some people have experienced success with that approach, and I understand the sentiment to a certain extent. In the end, ultimately the primary indicator of what makes a channel Beardtube is whether the channel does video essays and is explicitly anti-capitalist. Beardtube, of course, still encompasses a diverse range of viewpoints including anarchists, democratic socialists, orthodox Marxists, Marxist-Leninists, left communists, and basically anyone else who is explicitly anti-capitalist. My bias personally is towards Marxist-Leninist channels, as those are the channels I've watched the most of, so this video might be heavier in featuring those kinds of channels, but I do try to list other types of channels in this video as well. I also want this video to put a light on lesser known channels, so those channels will typically come earlier on in the video, with the more well-known channels that people are more likely to already know will come later. Of course, as a lesser known part of Breadtube myself, it's important that I have the financial stability to continue to make high quality, well-researched videos. Subscribing to my Patreon will help give me the funds to make YouTube a long-term project for me, and so that I don't become another of the many Beardtube channels that have sadly died out over time. The Patreon gives various benefits, like early access to my videos before they're posted to YouTube, a unique role with special privileges in the Chemical Mind Discord, and polls, updates, Q&As, and extra content exclusive to Patreon. But enough about me. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. So first of all, Xander Hall is a really fantastic example of No, I'm kidding. Now let's actually get into the video. Tavrish Endymion is a great channel. His video, Socialism Has Worked, is maybe the single best pro-socialist state video I've ever seen. It's a masterpiece that I highly recommend sharing with anti-tanky types, probably more than any other. Unfortunately, he hasn't made a video in over 2 years now, so I assume his channel is likely dead at this point, but his videos are still so good that it's more than worth checking them out. The Young Hegelian is a newer YouTuber. He's only made a few videos, but these few videos are all solid, especially his one on tankies, which is another masterful takedown of anti-tanky types, and I again recommend sharing this video in particular with anti-tanky types. One Dime is a Trotskyist-leaning YouTuber from what I've seen from his podcast. Maybe he's more of an orthodox Marxist, I'm not completely sure. What I do know is that he's not just the best video editor in Beardtube, but pretty much in Breadtube as well. His visuals are amazing, to the point that I find myself almost not focusing on the words he's saying, and just looking at the incredible editing he does, because it's truly next level. His scripts are of course still very solid. Ultimately, it's just criminal how few subscribers he has compared to the actual level of work he puts into his videos, and yeah, I hope he keeps putting them out there, because he hasn't for quite a few months. Halim Alra is another example of a channel with fantastic editing, probably the best in Beardtube after One Dime. His video scripts are also fantastic, and his video on historical materialism, for example, is a very good basic primer that helped clarify a lot of things for me, both in terms of its visuals and in terms of its clear, simple language. Unfortunately, that was his latest video, and it came out over a year ago, so we'll see if he's actually going to come back or if he's moved on to other things. Finnish Bolshevik, also known as Finbol, has been around for a long time at this point. He is one of the oldest left-wing YouTube channels still around. He's also by far one of the most well-read and thorough in his research. His videos on the Moscow trials are incredibly fascinating and exceptionally dense with information and names, to the point that you really have to watch all 4 of the videos on it twice to process the things he's saying. Even if you don't agree with everything he says, or at least have some skepticism, it's still impressive regardless how much reading and research he puts into each video. His video on the Kronstadt Rebellion is similarly impressively researched and cited, as are his videos on Khrushchev. Finbol does things that almost no one else does, where he goes to documents like a book written by someone involved in the Kronstadt Mutiny, or by reading from beginning to end the entire incredibly dense transcripts of the Moscow trials, which basically no one who claims to know anything about the Moscow trials has actually read, but Finbol has. His videos don't have much in the way of flair or aesthetics, yes, but they're all so informational and well-sourced that it more than makes up for the lack of visual pizzazz. If there's a channel you're looking for that specifically focuses mainly on the USSR, then Finbol is one of the best channels out there. Bestie Marx is a newer YouTuber from Italy, and he's gained a lot of subscribers in a short period of time so far as Beardtube goes, and for good reason. His videos are high quality and well researched. His video on Italian fascism is fantastic, as is his 3-part series on the failed German Revolution. Black Bolshevik is a YouTuber from the Caribbean, and it's criminally unfair how few viewers he gets. He genuinely has the best thumbnail game of anyone on YouTube, at least in my opinion, and his editing and his scripts are also great. All in all, it's a mystery to me how he hasn't gained more traction. This video on Afrofuturism is really interesting introduction to the idea of Afrofuturism, but from what I've seen, all of his videos are interesting and educational and entertaining, so check them out. Fellow Traveler has been around for a few years at this point, and he's another channel who focuses a lot on the USSR, but also more modern politics as well. The production value in FT's videos used to be a bit on the rough side, but it's been improving over time, And the actual content of the videos themselves are really solid and informative and knowledgeable. I highly recommend, for example, his video on the Founding Fathers. Mexi is one of the smartest and most well-spoken leftists on Breadtube, Beardtube, among what is already a lot of smart people. She doesn't really do any editing besides just sitting in front of the camera and talking, but her scripts are so good that it doesn't really matter. I especially respect how much she incorporates ecology and the idea of degrowth into her anti-capitalist analyses. She's probably the most ecology-oriented of the bigger Beardtubers, and that is a similar route I myself want to go down because climate change and ecology is the number one issue for me, really. She also talks about other issues relating to capitalism and her own struggles with chronic illness and eating disorders, and I particularly recommend these two videos on specific actionable strategies for transitioning from capitalism while living in the imperial core, where an actual revolution in any time soon is extremely unlikely, as well as her video of what a post-capitalist world could and should look like. She also does great interviews with people like Richard Wolff and Abby Martin. So Bad Empanada gets a ton of shit, and in some ways rightly so, for his very aggressive persona online. He's had around 10 Twitter accounts banned at this point, but goddamn if the guy doesn't do the most extensively researched, brilliant videos of basically anyone on the internet. His completely unflinching and uncompromising anti-colonialist, anti-imperialist approach, and the very clear and fact-based way he discusses these ideas was a huge inspiration to me and how I've come to see the world as well. He stands up truly and totally for internationalist ideals, and I really respect that. His best videos are really among the very best political and history-related videos on YouTube. He has basically more masterpieces than anyone else by a good deal. I particularly recommend these three, but there are just too many to even begin with. His second channel, where he uploads excerpts from his streams, is also very educational. And to a certain extent, I can understand how incredibly aggressive he is online when he's made so many great videos, yet he's just considered by many to be a tanky, crazy person. If you watch videos on his second channel especially, his personality just changes over time from a far more reserved and measured person into just an openly abrasive, angry, insulting one. And while I think this actually makes for a lot of amusing entertainment when this anger is directed against people who deserve it, I think it also shows perhaps a lot of the disillusionment and maybe resentment that has risen in the guy as well. Marxism Today is from Ireland, and so a lot of his perspective and videos are based around Irish republicanism and Irish Republican history, which is very cool. His videos are also really well produced and well made, and he also has live stream talks that are also really great. He's just a funny and charismatic and all around really cool person. Particularly interesting to me was his video on the Filipino Revolution, exploring how there is an actual socialist revolution, albeit a low temperature one, going on there at this present day. I haven't watched too much of Vicky's channel at this point, but her video on how the USSR fell is fantastic. It's also impressive how often she puts out videos, like at least 2 a month for many years now. I don't really know if anyone in Beardtube has her level of consistency. She also doesn't utopianize socialism or fall into the trap of trying to over-justify literally every error the USSR ever made. It's okay to justify or try to reason through these things, and she does, but she makes active efforts to do this in a balanced way that is really well thought out, which I respect. Lady Izdihar is really unique because her focus is mainly not on politics, though she does occasionally do that kind of thing, but more exploring day-to-day life and culture and religion in the USSR. She likes to find newspapers and obscure books and all these cool documents and objects from the USSR and display them on her channel. She's also Muslim and likes to shine a light on the large Muslim population of the USSR, which is something I wasn't even really aware of, which is really interesting. Of course, as a woman Muslim who studies the USSR, she gets more harassment than just about anyone else online. So it's extra impressive that she puts up with all the extra dynamics of hate that someone like me will never have to face. And I've already faced a lot of hate, so I can't even imagine. This video is a fantastic look at a really interesting English language newspaper in Moscow, and this is a rare political video by her that is not all-encompassing, but gives some interesting insights into the Soviet perspective during dekulakization. If you want a channel where you can listen to audiobooks of old Marxist texts, many of them fairly obscure, then Socialism for All is a great resource. It's impressive the amount of work he puts in, because just narrating one book after the next in a clear manner is a lot of effort. And he also adds his own input to the things he reads every so often as well. One lesser-known reading I found really interesting was an interview between H.G. Wells and Joseph Stalin. Besides just the memery of the idea of H.G. Wells interviewing Stalin, it is a genuinely very interesting discussion. And yes, he doesn't actually do video essays, but I still think he is a useful enough resource to be worth mentioning. Luna Oi's perspective is similar to Marxism today in that she is from a country with a long socialist history in Vietnam. Her own family was directly affected by the Vietnam War, so she had a very direct connection to that past. And so she has an interesting perspective on things. Sometimes I feel like she's a bit overly nationalistic, a bit overly praising of Vietnam, but this is only an early impression, and I don't think this is bad faith, and I also definitely know less about the country than her, so I don't presume to just disregard the things she says either. So Non-Compete is Luna Oi's husband, and he's also one of the only anarchists whose videos I've watched. I haven't actually watched his videos on anarchism itself, but his videos on anti-capitalism in general are really good. He has a great combination of solid production value in his videos, combined with really fantastic scripts. I especially recommend a video like his journey from becoming a capitalist to a communist, and his video making fun of the lists of, brutal murdering commies, but putting it as capitalists instead. Hakim is probably the biggest channel on YouTube that talks about socialist states in positive ways. He has a deep and impressive economic and theoretical understanding of Marxism that few people do, and his video on the Black Book of Communism especially was a huge eye-opener for me when I started to move further left. He also gives a lot of book reading recommendations as well, which is what led me to Black Shirts and Reds, which is also another book that really helped me turn left. He does fairly often get a bit too theoretical and abstract for me in a way that can get confusing for many people, and also unlike similar channels that cover the USSR like Finbull and Tavarish, he can be kind of light when it comes to citing his sources as well. But of course it depends. He will sometimes have a video that is filled with citations, and then sometimes he'll have videos which have little to no citations. But this is something I could also be better myself at doing at times, so I do get it. All in all though, he's a very good channel. Last but not least, I can't go through this video without mentioning Second Thought. His channel easily has the most subscribers of any English socialist channel on YouTube, and while this is no small part thanks to his excellent scripts and production value, this is also because he did non-socialist content for quite a while before he pivoted to socialism, but he really does deserve every single subscriber that he has. In terms of consistency as well as quality of both his scripts and his visuals, Second Thought is one of the best Breadtube has to offer. For some honorable mentions, a couple more Marxist-Leninist channels include Democratic Marxist 01 and Politsturm International. Some anarchist channels that I haven't really watched myself include Anarcho-Pac and Re-Education. And some other major orthodox Marxist or other non-denominational Marxist or leftcom Marxist channels include John the Duncan, Azure Scapegoat, Balkan Odyssey, Hugh Gopnik, and Bad Mouse. I haven't covered everyone in Beardtube, of course. There's plenty of other channels, especially smaller ones like mine, as well as many channels in other languages, but these are some of the most worthwhile in English. Also interestingly is the idea of Beard Twitch. I used to think Twitch was just terrible, and I still do prefer and think the video essay format is superior in a lot of ways, but in terms of things like community and personal interaction, Twitch is actually pretty cool, and there are a surprising number of genuine communists on the platform, which I didn't think was a thing. Famous Horse is the only Twitch person I've watched, but he's really cool, and you should check him out. If there are any other communist Twitch streamers you know of worth checking out, or if there are any other Breadtubers you think I missed, let me know in the comments below. That's about all I have for this video. If you liked the video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and also support me over Patreon. It would really mean a lot. Thank you also to my current patrons, Professional Tanky, Richard Scott Wigton, Alexander Bernston, and Pybot 5000. Thanks for watching.